Over to the pucks, and here's a look at the Game 5 market report between the Florida Panthers and the New York Rangers. Remember, the series tied at 2 apiece following Florida's overtime win. The line opened at -105 Rangers, but has flipped with some sharp money coming in on those road Florida Panthers. The public, though, remains bullish on the Rangers holding serve at home, with 60% of the money coming in on New York. The over 5.5 also getting the majority of the money, despite there being 5 or less goals in all but one game thus far. So keeping that in mind, we bring in Michael Leboff, NHL expert, here to the show. So Mike, I got to ask you, Dallas, they were up 2-1. New York also up 2-1. Both were the underdogs entering their series, and then game 4 all of a sudden evened up. Which team would you put more in, like, oh, we're in trouble, Dallas or the Rangers?
Yeah, I think it's Dallas, and it just comes down to an injury situation for the Stars, right? There's a team that's built on depth. That's how they win. They can roll 4 lines and 3 defensive pairings, and everyone has a specific role. They're suited for that role. And now that Chris Tanev, who is questionable at best for the rest of the series after blocking a shot in game number 4 in Edmonton, is out, that's going to put some struggling players into bigger roles, notably Ryan Suter, and cause the Stars to lean pretty heavily on guys like Miro Heiskanen, Thomas Harley, and Esa Lindell. Those guys can handle the assignment, but it just does take away from what Dallas's biggest strength was, not just overall, but in the series, right? Like they are the deeper team against Edmonton. Edmonton's pretty top heavy. They just want to tread water when their big guns aren't out there, and Dallas wants to win every shift basically, and it becomes a lot harder without Tanev. So it's not. I wouldn't say either team is should be in panic mode. It's 2-2. They both have home ice advantage in the best 2 of 3 that's now unfolding. But I do think Dallas, especially because we just know that the Rangers are masters at hanging around and nicking wins even in games they're outplayed.
Yeah, it really feels like, the Rangers somehow, despite being outplayed in, probably 2 or the last 3 games, have been able to at least force overtime. They've won 2 of those 3 overtimes. In Dallas, it felt like that 2-0 lead in last night's game was their best shot, going up 3-1 and then having to hold serve for just, one more win. But definitely interesting here, and both obviously underdogs right now entering the final stretch here despite the home ice. But let's talk tonight's game. Panthers, Rangers, 8 p.m. Rangers back at Madison Square Garden. How are you attacking this game?
Yeah, this has been a funny series from a betting perspective, because I think that on the road the Rangers have held some value. They were in the plus 140 or longer range for game 4. I thought that was a little crazy, even though they were outplayed and lost. So you'd say technically the right bet was the Panthers, because they tick both those boxes. But at the same time, when you're betting the Rangers right now in this matchup, you are seeding the fact that they're probably going to lose the ice tilt battle, especially at 5-on-5, and it's whether or not Igor Shesterkin keeps them in the game long enough to allow one of their high skilled players to create a moment of magic. Right now, it's most likely been Alexis Lafreniere, because the other Stars are having some quiet series, but they're hanging around. Like, the series is 2-2. I think what you said is pretty fair. That most people would agree the score line, if all things were equal and justice was served, like, the Panthers would probably be up 3-1 in the series, but that's not how it goes, and that's what the Rangers do. So rather than play into the number, I think that the Panthers would be I'd be closer on the Panthers at like -125. If it's -120 or better, maybe a bet on the Panthers. But I like this to be a very quiet first period for a couple of the reasons I just said, right? Like, the Rangers need to stabilize. They need to have themselves a game where they can breathe. They can get the puck out. They're not taking these long minute plus shifts in their own zone defending. So I think a pretty crisp effort right out of the gates from the Rangers will be expected. And the Panthers have no issue playing into that style too. We've seen it at the Garden twice, that these two teams have no problem getting into a staring contest. So I think that if you go under or the first period exact score 0-0, first period to end scoreless, under 0, under half a goal in the first period, however your book lists it. If you can get better than plus 300 on that, I like that bet quite a bit, because I do think that this thing starts very stodgy.
I love how, you got to go with the plus money. You can't just take the 1.5 goals. It's got to be a step further, a 0 goal scored. But I do want to ask you, because you mentioned, the Rangers top guys, we finally saw Panarin kind of get active, had a couple assists in that loss in game 4, but Mika Zibanejad, Chris Kreider, they've been quiet this entire series. Is it one of those things of like Rangers fans should feel okay because their stars have not been great? Or is it almost one of those things that like Barkov, Forsling, those units are so good defensively that maybe they're not going to get production out of these guys?
I think it's the former. I would be over the moon if I was a Ranger fan and the series was 2-2 going back to the Garden. Honestly, like you want to outplay the opponent, you want to be the better team. But if you've perhaps taken their best shot and you haven't given your best shot, that's what you're thinking at least. And it's 2-2. You think, okay, our best shot is still coming, and you would expect that these guys would start coming around. And I do think we are overlooking the other side of the equation, which you sharply noted, right? Like the Panthers are really good. So they have one of the best two-way forwards in the league. Gus Forsling is a star defenseman. So they have the tools to slow these guys down. It's not that they're just cold. They're just struggling because there's not much room out there. But if that opens up for the Rangers, like they all of a sudden, like the scale kind of tilts in their direction. If either one of these guys gets going, and they are correlated because they play on the same line, and a lot of their success is derived from one another. So if one gets going, that probably means he takes the other one with him. So yeah, I would feel in terms of winning the series like totally fine because you haven't seen the best from those two guys yet, and it's 2-2.
Yeah, definitely an interesting thing to keep an eye on, and we'll see if they can get it going. But Barclay Goodrow obviously playing hero ball on the ice, and same with Lafreniere.